Hi, I'm Jackson, and this is my submission for the Cook the Books competition. Today I'm making an eggs benedict on a homemade biscuit and a smoked cream cheese roulade with parsnip puree. To start, I butchered a whole chicken and removed the skin in one piece. I'll be scraping the excess fat off it and using it to wrap the roulade. I then am removing the supremes from the carcass and Frenching the ends, and I'll be using this carcass for my stock. After Frenching the supremes and cleaning them up a little bit, I butterflied them so that I can stuff them later. After a quick cleanup, I'm just roughly chopping the veg to about a medium dice for the chicken stock. I need them to be small enough to extract the flavors quickly, but not so small they disintegrate and make my stock cloudy or chunky because I'll be using it for a smooth cream sauce later. I went with mirepoix and mushrooms for this because I wanted a little bit of the umami flavor carrying throughout the dish. And I decided to sweat the veg out first to develop flavor, as I wanted to try and make this dish as quickly as possible, and starting it in cold water with raw veggies just wouldn't bring the kind of flavors out that I needed. I started seasoning in layers as I'm adding each vegetable. This helps to build the flavor of the stock and will ultimately carry out more flavor throughout my stock. I really need this stock to be very concentrated for the sauce that I'm making, as it's a fairly simple sauce, but needs to carry a lot of flavor. Here I'm starting to make the biscuits. I'll use these for the benedict. It's a simple recipe. It's just flour, sugar, salt, baking soda, butter, and buttermilk. But if you use really cold ingredients, it'll yield a really flaky, delicious biscuit when the dough is made nicely. If you start it with cold butter and laminate it, it forms layers of cold butter, and when it bakes, it puffs up and makes really flaky layers. I'm just chopping up chives to add to the biscuits now as well. I roasted the chicken bones off first to start the Maillard reaction because I knew I wouldn't be getting any browning in the pot, but I wanted that dense chicken flavor. And I picked all the crispy pieces off the tray and added them as well. Once the veggies started to get soft, and then added cold water and brought it to a boil. In the food processor, I mixed the flour mixture and the cold butter. And using a food processor, you can get little beads of butter. You can grate the butter as well, but I find the food processor just a little easier. With the small beads, it just makes a more uniform dough when mixing. By mixing in the cold buttermilk and kneading it just until it comes together, it makes a really flaky dough. And so, over mixing it or using not very cold ingredients will make it tough and chewy and just not what you want for a Benedict. You want a nice flaky biscuit. So at this point, I'm adding the aromatics to the stock and starting the skimming process. I don't want any excess fat in there, as it'll make the final sauce just unpleasant to eat. The next thing I'll be making is the cream cheese filling for the roulade. So I started by mixing butter with the walnuts just to get some moisture on them so the smoke would penetrate. And then I roughly diced an onion and put them on a lined baking sheet with the cream cheese and threw them on the smoker at 150 for about an hour. I started melting and browning the butter for my hollandaise, as well as added vinegar to the poaching water to ensure a nice shaped poached egg, and started tempering my egg yolks for the hollandaise. I added a small bit of hollandaise reduction. When I started, I created the reduction earlier that day with apple cider vinegar, white wine, pink peppercorns, herb stems, and a bay leaf, and some thyme. I then streamed in the brown butter once they were tempered, and seasoned with Tabasco, lemon juice, salt, and a little bit more reduction. With the hollandaise made, I'm starting to plate the Benedict, so I'm toasting the biscuit and poaching the eggs. I decided to go with a crispy prosciutto for the Benedict, as I think that nice crispiness goes with and saltiness goes with the biscuit and the rich hollandaise. I made a small indent in the prosciutto as well, so the egg will stay on it nicer and not fall off. I added the eggs to the benedict after draining the water off them so they didn't get soggy, and then added the hollandaise on top, and finished with chives. And after cutting one of them open, they are absolutely perfect. Nice and runny, nice and flaky biscuit, and they were delicious. That was lunch. Next up is making the filling for the roulade. So I blitzed together the smoked ingredients together with parsley, and I set it aside for later. I then quartered the parsnips and cored them and diced, and I'll be blanching them just until they're fork tender so I can puree them smooth with the cream and garlic that I'll be doing for them. Here I'm stuffing the roulade and rolling it as tight as I can while squeezing out the excess filling. Making sure it's really tight will make sure it cooks evenly as well as just keeps its shape. The saran wrap was not very sticky for some reason today, so it made rolling it quite difficult, but as long as you keep pulling the air out, yeah, you can get it really nice and tight. And twisting up the edges will just keep it in a nice shape, and it'll be nice and an even cylinder. I then vacuum sealed it and started poaching it in cold water. After this, I pureed some garlic with the salt and scraping method for the parsnip puree, and then sweated out in a pot with thyme and butter, and then added the heavy cream and brought it to a simmer while the roulade is poaching. Once the water is brought to a boil from cold with the roulade in it, it will bring the chicken to a very nice temp so that when you just bake it, it'll be crispy on the outside and perfectly cooked on the inside. I then strained and degreased the stock and pureed the parsnip with half the cream and blended until it was smooth but thick enough still that I could spread it. The other half of the cream I reduced by another half along with the chicken stock, and then seasoned the roulade and put it in the oven at 450 to get a nice crispy skin. I then started the cream sauce, so I slowly added the reduced stock to the cream and then seasoned it with lemon juice, salt, and white pepper. And then a quick pan sear on the last side of the chicken to get it crispy, and I started to sear the mushrooms. I seared the mushrooms in butter and salt and pepper, and tossed with a little bit of lemon juice as well. And then I sauteed the Brussels leaves. I decided to go with just the leaves and not the whole Brussels because it added a nice crunch without being too big of a chunk going along with the mushrooms because they were nice and soft, but still had a bit of a chew to them. I finished the sauce with a Monte Beurre and sliced the chicken on a bias, then started a plate. Here's the finished product. It was creamy and rich from the parsnip puree and the sauce, but the sauce had a really nice brightness from the lemon juice that helped to cut through that richness. And then the smokiness of the cream cheese filling was really nice mixed together with that.